They called me weak, unwanted, a stain on my family's name. When the alpha I was supposed to marry rejected me in front of the entire pack, they laughed. When my father sold me like livestock to a crippled warlord in the frozen north, they cheered. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't broken. I was a bomb waiting to detonate. And the moment I stopped playing by their rules, everything changed. This is the story of how a rejected Omega became the most dangerous woman in the frontier. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The grand hall of House Ashvale smelled like rot beneath the perfume. Seren stood at the center of the marble floor, her wrists bound in ceremonial silver chains that were supposed to symbolize purity. All she felt was the weight, the cold, the eyes. Hundreds of them, alphas in their finest coats, medals pinned to their chests like badges of superiority, betas whispering behind jeweled fans, their voices a constant hum of judgment. Omegas perched on the arms of their mates, looking at her with something between pity and relief that it wasn't them up there on display. Her father stood to the right of the dais, chin high, hands clasped behind his back like he was presiding over a triumph instead of a funeral. Lord Ashvale had perfected that look over the years, stoic, untouchable, a man above consequence. But Seren knew better. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched every time someone whispered too loud, the slight sheen of sweat on his temple despite the cool air. House Ashvale was drowning in debt, and she was the last asset left to sell. "Let's get this over with," muttered a voice from the crowd. A beta woman with too much rouge and a sneer that could cut glass. Laughter rippled through the hall like a wave, crashing against Seren's composure. She kept her eyes forward. She'd learned early that looking down made it worse. Weakness invited cruelty, the way blood invited sharks. So she stood straight, shoulders back, breathing through her nose the way her mother had taught her before the sickness took her 3 years ago. "Don't let them see you break, Seren. The moment they see a crack, they'll tear you apart." But it was hard. So damn hard. At the front of the room, on a raised platform draped in crimson silk and gold thread, sat Alpha Kael Draymore, her supposed mate. The man she'd been promised to since she was 16 years old. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the blonde Omega on his lap. Seren's stomach twisted into a knot so tight it hurt to breathe. The girl was beautiful, porcelain skin, wide blue eyes that sparkled with manufactured innocence, curves in all the places society said mattered. Everything an Omega was supposed to be. Delicate, soft, submissive. She giggled at something Kael whispered in her ear, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his chest. Seren had met her once, 2 months ago, at a gathering in the southern estates. Lyra Tenbrook, daughter of a trade baron who'd made his fortune shipping grain and weapons. Sweet voice, empty head, the kind of girl who cried if someone raised their voice or looked at her wrong. The kind of girl Kael apparently wanted. The kind of girl Seren would never be. "Ladies and gentlemen," her father began, his voice booming across the hall with practiced authority, "we are gathered here today to witness the bonding ceremony of my daughter, Seren Ashvale, to Alpha Kael Draymore of House Draymore. A union that will strengthen both our houses and bring prosperity to— I reject her." The words cut through the air like a blade through silk. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that precedes violence or catastrophe. Seren's heart stopped. Actually, stopped. She felt it stutter in her chest, then restart with a painful thud that made her dizzy. Kael rose from his seat, pushing Lyra gently aside with one hand. The blonde Omega pouted but stayed quiet, her eyes gleaming with something ugly. Triumph, maybe. Or hunger for the spectacle about to unfold. Kael descended the platform steps slowly, deliberately, his boots echoing on the marble like a death march. He was tall, 6'3" at least, broad-shouldered, dark-haired with sharp green eyes that never missed a weakness. The kind of alpha that made people move out of the way without thinking. Handsome in a sharp, predatory way that women whispered about, and men envied. And right now, he was looking at Seren like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. "I reject this bond," he said louder, his voice steady and confident, carrying to every corner of the hall. I will not be tied to a weak Omega who brings nothing to my house but shame and liability. The crowd erupted, gasps, shouts, a few nervous laughs from the younger alphas who thought this was entertainment. The older ones just watched, calculating, already figuring out how to use this disaster to their advantage. Seren felt the floor tilt beneath her feet, her vision blurred at the edges. Kael, her father said sharply, stepping forward, his hand raised as if that would stop what was already happening. This bond was arranged 7 years ago. Contracts were signed. You cannot simply— I can, Kael interrupted, not even glancing at Lord Ashvale. And I am. Look at her, Ashvale. Really, look at her. She's small, fragile. I've seen her medical reports. My counsel demanded I review them before committing. She can barely hold her scent for more than an hour. Half the physicians think she's defective. Her heats are irregular. Her blood work shows anomalies no one can explain. And you want me to tie my bloodline to that? Each word landed like a physical blow. Seren wanted to speak, wanted to scream, but her throat was locked tight. Watch your mouth, Seren's father growled, his face flushing red. You're speaking about my daughter. Your damaged daughter, Kael corrected smoothly. And I'm speaking the truth everyone in this room already knows, but is too polite to say out loud. She's not fit to be an alpha's mate. She's certainly not fit to be my mate. There are laws, her father started, desperation creeping into his voice now. Laws that allow an alpha to refuse a bond if the Omega is deemed unfit for breeding or unable to fulfill the duties of the position, Kael cut in. His tone almost bored now, like this was a business transaction he was eager to conclude. And I'm invoking that right, publicly, in front of witnesses, right now. The room exploded into chaos. People were shouting, arguing, some laughing outright. A group of older Omegas in the back were crying, probably imagining themselves in Seren's position, thanking whatever forces governed their lives that it wasn't them up there being destroyed. Seren stood frozen, her mind spinning in circles, unable to grasp what was happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd known Kael didn't love her. She wasn't stupid enough to believe in fairy tales. She'd known it was a political arrangement, a merger of houses, a way to secure alliances and money. But she'd thought, stupidly, naively, that he would at least honor it, that there was some basic decency, some code among their kind that prevented this exact scenario. She'd been wrong. You bastard, she whispered, the words barely audible. Kael raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly forward. What was that? Speak up, Omega. You're a coward, she said louder, her voice shaking but gaining strength with each syllable. You've known about this bond for 7 years. You could have said something, done something, ended it quietly, privately, but you waited until now, until I'm standing in front of everyone, in chains, on display, so you could humiliate me, so you could break me in public and make sure everyone saw it happen. I don't owe you anything, Kael said simply, straightening. You owe me honesty, and I'm giving it to you. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping just low enough that only she could hear. You're weak, Seren. You always have been. I need a mate who can stand beside me, who can strengthen my position, who can give me strong heirs and command respect in society. Not someone I have to protect and make excuses for. Not someone who makes me look weak just by association. Then you're a fool, Seren said quietly, her hands balling into fists despite the chains. Kael laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. Am I? Yes, because strength isn't just muscle and scent and dominance. It's surviving when everyone wants you to break. It's standing when everything tells you to fall. And I'm still standing. I'm still here. Which is more than I can say for half the alphas in this room who fold the moment things get difficult. For a moment, just a fleeting second, something flickered in Kael's eyes. Doubt, maybe. Or regret. Or recognition that he was making a mistake. Then it was gone, shuttered behind cold indifference. Enjoy your life, Seren, he said, turning away and heading back toward the platform. What's left of it, anyway? He sat back down, and Lyra immediately draped herself over him, pressing her face into his neck and shooting Seren a triumphant smile over his shoulder, the kind of smile that said, I won and you lost. The crowd began to disperse, their voices rising in a chaotic buzz of gossip and speculation. Some people were already placing bets on how long it would take for House Ashvale to collapse completely now that their last bargaining chip had been publicly burned. Seren stood alone in the center of the hall, chains still on her wrists, tears burning hot behind her eyes. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. But inside something was breaking, or maybe it had already broken, and she was just now noticing. Her father found her in the East Wing an hour later. Seren was sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom, back against the wall, staring at nothing. The chains were gone. Some nameless servant had unlocked them and scurried away without meeting her eyes, but she could still feel the weight, the cold metal ghost against her skin. The room looked smaller than she remembered. The bed she'd slept in since she was a child, the desk where she'd studied, the window overlooking the gardens where she used to read for hours. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now, some other version of herself who'd believed things might work out. Seren. She didn't look up. Lord Ashvale stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He stood there for a long moment, silent, probably trying to figure out what to say. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice rough. Seren laughed. It came out bitter and sharp, scraping her throat on the way out. "Are you? I didn't know he would do that. I swear I didn't." "Yes, you did." She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and dry. "You knew he didn't want me. You knew I wasn't enough, that I didn't meet his standards, that the physicians had flagged concerns about my health. But you pushed it anyway because you needed his money, his connections, his name. You gambled that he'd go through with it out of obligation or pride, and you lost." Her father flinched like she'd slapped him. "Don't," Seren said flatly. "Don't pretend this was ever about me or my well-being or my future. This was about saving the house, saving your reputation, saving yourself." "It was about you," he said quietly, moving closer. "I thought, if you bonded with Kael, you'd be safe, protected. You'd have a future, security, a position in society. I thought I was doing the right thing. I had a future before you sold it to the highest bidder. I had no choice, Seren. The debts." "There's always a choice," she interrupted. "You just didn't like the other options." Silence fell between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Lord Ashvale exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples with both hands. He looked older than she remembered, grayer, lines around his eyes and mouth that hadn't been there a year ago, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "We're ruined," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "The debts are too high. The creditors are circling like vultures. If I don't find a way to stabilize the house in the next 3 months, we'll lose everything. The estate, the name, all of it. So sell the estate. Sell the artwork, the furniture, the horses. Sell yourself if you have to, but don't sell me again." "It's too late for that." The air left Seren's lungs in a rush. "What?" Her father met her gaze, and she saw the truth there before he even spoke. "I've made another arrangement," he said. "No. A northern warlord, Alpha Ronan Virik. He's offered a substantial sum in exchange for a contract marriage, enough to clear our debts and stabilize the house for at least 5 years. "No," Seren said louder, scrambling to her feet. "I won't do it. You can't make me." "You don't have a choice. I always have a choice." "Not anymore." Her father's voice hardened, taking on the tone he used when negotiating business deals. "You're 23 years old, Seren, unmated, publicly rejected by one of the most prominent alphas in the region. No house will take you now. No respectable alpha will want you after what happened today. This contract with Virik, it's the only option left." "Then I'll leave," Seren said desperately, her mind racing. "I'll go south, find work, start over somewhere no one knows me. I don't need a mate or a house or any of this." "You'll die out there," her father interrupted sharply. "An unmated Omega alone in the world? You wouldn't last a week before someone took advantage of you or worse. You know how society works. You know what happens to Omegas without protection. Better than being sold like cattle to a stranger. This isn't about pride or dignity or your feelings," her father snapped, his patience finally breaking. "It's about survival. Virik's offer saves the house. It saves the name. It saves you, whether you see it that way or not. You'll have a roof over your head, protection, resources, a position, even if it's in the middle of nowhere." "I don't want his protection or his name." "Too bad. You don't get to choose anymore." Seren stared at him, chest heaving, feeling like the walls were closing in. The contract is already signed, her father continued, his voice flat now, empty of emotion. He's paid half up front. The rest comes when you arrive and the binding ceremony is complete. You leave in 3 days. I suggest you spend that time packing and preparing yourself mentally for what comes next. I hate you, Seren said, the words coming out cold and certain. Her father's expression didn't change. I know, and someday, when you're older, and the house still exists because of this decision, maybe you'll understand. Or maybe you won't. Either way, it's done. He turned and walked toward the door. What kind of man sells his own daughter twice in one day? Seren called after him. Lord Ashvale paused at the threshold, his hand on the doorframe. For a moment she thought he might actually answer, might offer some justification or explanation that would make this hurt less. Instead, he just said, a desperate one, and walked out, leaving her alone in the empty room. Seren sank back down to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. The tears came then, hot and angry and unstoppable. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the future that had been ripped away, for the mother who wasn't here to protect her anymore. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and rage and fear, something else stirred, something that refused to accept this as the end of her story. Chat. 3 days passed in a haze. Seren barely ate. The servants brought meals to her room 3 times a day, and she pushed the food around her plate without tasting it. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kael's face, heard the crowd's laughter, felt the weight of the chains. She spent most of her time in the library, desperate for any information about the place she was being sent to, desperate to understand the man who'd bought her like livestock. What she found wasn't encouraging. The northern frontier was brutal, a vast expanse of frozen wilderness where winter lasted 8 months, and summer was a cruel joke that barely thawed the ground. The settlements up there were scattered, isolated, connected by dangerous roads that claimed lives every season. It was a place where the weak didn't last, and the strong ruled through blood and dominance and fear. The clans up there followed old laws, older than the council, older than the houses, older than most recorded history. Laws written in survival and violence, laws that said strength was the only currency that mattered. And Alpha Ronan Virik was one of the most feared men in that unforgiving landscape. The historical records painted a grim picture. Virik had been a legendary warrior once, a tactician who'd held the northern border against invasions from the western territories for nearly a decade. Undefeated in battle, respected by his enemies, worshipped by his soldiers. Then came the Battle of Frozen River. The reports were vague on details. Military records often were when it came to disasters, but the outcome was clear. Virik's forces had been ambushed, slaughtered. He'd been gravely wounded, barely surviving. When he'd finally returned to his fortress, half his council had abandoned him, declaring him unfit to lead. The fortress itself had fallen into disrepair. Trade routes had dried up. Alliances had crumbled. Some of the newer reports, written by southern traders who'd passed through Virik territory, painted an even darker picture. They described a fortress that looked more like a tomb than a home, a warlord who rarely appeared in public, guards who spoke in whispers and jumped at shadows. One account, written by a merchant who'd sheltered there during a blizzard, described Virik as a ghost ruling over ghosts, waiting for death in a place that had already died. And now Seren was supposed to be his wife. The thought made her sick. On the morning of her departure, she packed a single bag. A few changes of clothes, practical things, warm things, nothing fancy. 3 books she couldn't bear to leave behind. Her mother's ring, a simple silver band she wore on a chain around her neck because it was too big for her fingers. She didn't say goodbye to her father, didn't even look for him. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. The servants who'd known her since childhood avoided her eyes. The ones who'd always been kind suddenly found urgent tasks elsewhere when she walked by. Shame was contagious in their world, and she was infected now. When the carriage arrived, she climbed in without looking back at the estate. The driver was a grizzled beta with a scarred face and cold eyes that had seen too much. He didn't speak, didn't introduce himself, didn't offer pleasantries or false comfort, just cracked the reins and set the horses moving at a steady pace. Seren watched the estate disappear behind her through the small window, the gates shrinking in the distance until they were just a dark smudge against the horizon. This is it, she thought numbly. This is how it ends. Not with triumph or choice or dignity, just sold. But deep down, in a place she didn't quite understand yet, something else was stirring. Something old and primal and angry. Something that whispered in a voice she almost recognized. This isn't the end. This is where you stop pretending to be what they want and start becoming what you are. She didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. The journey north took 2 weeks of hard travel. 2 weeks of endless snow and frozen roads and gray skies that never seemed to end. 2 weeks of silent nights in ramshackle inns where the other travelers stared at her like she was a ghost or a curse or something equally unwelcome. The driver barely spoke more than a handful of words the entire trip. Eat. Sleep. Move. That was the extent of their communication. Seren didn't mind. She had no desire to talk about where she'd come from or where she was going. The further north they traveled, the colder it got. By the 5th day, she couldn't feel her fingers even wrapped in gloves. By the 10th, her breath came out in clouds so thick she could barely see through them. The landscape changed too. The rolling hills and forests of the southern territories gave way to flat, barren plains. Then rocky highlands. Then nothing but snow and ice and mountains that looked like teeth trying to bite the sky. They passed through settlements so small they barely qualified as villages. A dozen buildings huddled together against the wind, smoke rising from chimneys, faces peering out from behind frosted windows as the carriage rolled past. No one waved. No one smiled. In the north, strangers meant trouble. By the time they crossed into Virek territory, marked by stone pillars carved with symbols Seren didn't recognize, she'd given up trying to stay warm. Cold had become a permanent state of being. The fortress appeared on the horizon like a wound in the landscape, black stone walls rising out of the snow, jagged and unforgiving, looking less like a home and more like a prison built to contain something dangerous. No banners flying from the towers, no lights in the windows, just dark stone and darker silence. The carriage stopped at the main gate. A guard approached, a massive alpha with a shaved head and a nasty burn scar that ran from his jaw down to his collarbone. He looked Seren over like she was cargo that might have been damaged in transit. "This her?" he asked the driver in a voice like grinding stone. "Yeah." "She looks small, half-starved too. You sure she's the one?" "That's what the papers say." The guard grunted and waved them through. The gates opened with a sound like bones breaking. The courtyard inside was empty, no servants waiting to greet her. No ceremony, no welcome, just snow and silence and cold. The carriage stopped in the center of the courtyard. Seren climbed out, her legs stiff from 2 weeks of sitting, her boots crunching in the snow. She pulled her cloak tight around her shoulders, but it did nothing against the wind that cut through the courtyard like knives. The driver dropped her bag in the snow without ceremony and climbed back onto the carriage. "Wait," Seren called out. "Aren't you?" But he was already moving, the horses pulling the carriage back toward the gate. She stood there, alone, watching the gate close behind him with a finality that made her stomach drop. "What am I doing here?" Before she could spiral into panic, the main doors of the fortress opened. A woman stepped out, tall and lean, sharp-featured with silver hair pulled back in a tight braid that looked severe enough to hurt. She wore black leather armor, practical and worn, and moved like someone who'd spent their entire life ready for a fight. "Seren Ashvale," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I'm Mara, head of the guard. Follow me." She turned and walked back toward the doors without waiting for a response. Seren grabbed her bag and followed, her heart pounding. Inside, the fortress was just as cold as the outside. Stone floors, high ceilings that disappeared into shadow, torches flickering in iron sconces that provided barely enough light to see by. The whole place felt abandoned, haunted, like something important had died here and no one had bothered to bury it. Their footsteps echoed as Mara led her through a series of hallways, each one looking identical to the last, cold, empty, unwelcoming. "Rules," Mara said without looking back, her voice echoing off the stone. "Don't wander the fortress alone. You'll get lost, and we might not find you before you freeze. Don't ask unnecessary questions. Don't cause trouble or make demands. The Alpha doesn't like trouble, and neither do I." "When do I meet him?" Seren asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "When he's ready." "And when will that be?" "Not my call." They climbed a staircase that seemed to go on forever, spiraling upward into darkness. Is there anyone else here? Seren tried again. Other Omegas or... No. No other Omegas at all? You're the first one in this fortress in over 3 years, Mara said flatly. Last one left after the battle. Couldn't handle the isolation, or the Alpha, or both. That wasn't comforting. They finally stopped in front of a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands. Your room, Mara said, pushing it open. Inside was sparse to the point of cruelty. A bed that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the walls. A single chair. A small fireplace with a few logs stacked beside it. One narrow window that showed nothing but snow and darkness. Meals are at dawn and dusk in the main hall, Mara continued in the same emotionless tone. Someone will come get you. Until then, stay here. Get settled. Try to sleep. That's it? Seren asked, looking around the barren room. That's all you're going to tell me? Mara paused in the doorway, glancing back. For just a moment, something almost like pity crossed her hard features. What do you want me to say? She asked. That this place is welcoming? It's not. That the Alpha is kind? He's not. That you made a good choice coming here? She shook her head. You didn't have a choice. None of us did. This is the frontier. You survive it or you don't. What's he like? Seren asked quietly. Alpha Virek. What's he really like? Mara was silent for a long moment, her scarred hand gripping the doorframe. Broken, she said finally, just like the rest of us. Just like this place. Just like you're going to be if you don't toughen up fast. And then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a sound like a cell locking. Seren stood in the middle of the room, her bag still in her hand, staring at the cold walls. Welcome home, she thought bitterly. She dropped her bag on the floor and sat on the bed. It was harder than stone, just as she'd expected. The thin blanket smelled like dust and old smoke. Outside the window, the wind howled. Snow battered the glass. And somewhere deep in the fortress, somewhere below her, maybe, or above her, she couldn't tell, something growled. Low and threatening and definitely not human. Seren pulled the blanket around her shoulders and stared at the dying fire. She'd been sold twice, rejected publicly, and exiled to a frozen hell at the edge of the world. And somehow, impossibly, she knew this was just the beginning. The first night in the fortress, Seren didn't sleep. She tried. She lay on the stone-hard bed, wrapped in the thin blanket that smelled like abandonment, and closed her eyes. But every sound made her flinch. The wind screaming through cracks in the walls, the groan of settling stone, that low animalistic growl she'd heard earlier, which came again around midnight, closer this time, making the floor vibrate beneath her. When dawn finally crept through the narrow window, gray and weak, she gave up pretending. She washed her face in the basin of ice-cold water someone had left outside her door during the night. Changed into fresh clothes, plain wool trousers and a thick tunic, nothing like the delicate dresses she'd worn in the South. Those belonged to a different person, a different life. The knock came exactly at dawn, sharp and impatient. Seren opened the door to find a young beta woman with braided red hair and suspicious eyes. Breakfast, the woman said curtly. Follow me. Don't lag. They walked through corridors that all looked the same in the dim torchlight. Stone, shadow, cold. The beta, who didn't offer her name, moved quickly, clearly expecting Seren to keep up without complaint. The dining hall was massive and almost entirely empty. A long table ran down the center, scarred wood that looked like it had survived a few wars. Maybe it had. 3 people sat scattered along its length, eating in silence. All of them looked up when Seren entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Sit, the beta said, pointing to an empty spot near the end. Seren sat. A bowl of something that might have been porridge appeared in front of her, delivered by a kitchen worker who didn't make eye contact. It was gray. Lukewarm. It tasted like nothing. She ate it anyway. She'd learned in the past 3 days that refusing food was stupid. Biped, no matter how unappetizing. So you're the new one, a voice said from across the table. Seren looked up. A man was watching her, mid-30s, stocky build, arms covered in old scars. His face had the weathered look of someone who'd spent their entire life outdoors in brutal conditions. I'm Seren, she said quietly. I know who you are. Everyone knows. Word travels fast in a place this small. He shoveled another spoonful of porridge into his mouth. I'm Garrett, second in command of what's left of the guard. You met Mara yesterday. She was very welcoming, Seren said dryly. Garrett snorted. Mara doesn't do welcoming. She does functional. If she didn't throw you out on your ass, that's basically a warm hug by her standards. A younger woman sitting 2 seats down laughed at that. A sharp, bitter sound. Don't give the Southern girl false hope, Garrett. Mara hates everyone equally. It's one of her better qualities. This is Kira, Garrett said, gesturing with his spoon. She's in charge of supplies, which means she decides whether you freeze or starve, so I'd be nice to her. Kira smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I heard you cost the Alpha a fortune, half up front, half on delivery. Must be nice being worth something. The comment landed like a slap. Seren set down her spoon carefully. I didn't set the price. No, but you didn't refuse it either. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Kira said coldly. You chose to come here instead of throwing yourself into the ocean or running away or doing literally anything else. You chose to take the money and play the victim. Kira, Garrett warned. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Kira leaned forward, her eyes hard. We've been surviving on scraps up here for 3 years. 3 years of rationing, of watching people leave because there's no future here, of holding this place together with spit and prayers. And then the Alpha drops a fortune on some rejected Omega from the South who probably won't last a month. That's enough, Garrett said firmly. Is it? Because I'm wondering what makes her so special that we're supposed to just accept, I said enough. Kira glared at him, then pushed back from the table and walked out, her boots echoing on the stone. Silence fell. Seren stared at her bowl, her appetite completely gone. Don't take it personally, Garrett said after a moment. She's not wrong about the situation. We're barely holding on up here. Food's scarce. Trade routes are unreliable. Half the staff left after the battle. The ones who stayed, well, we stayed because we had nowhere else to go or because we're too stubborn to quit. Seeing the Alpha spend that kind of money on a contract marriage when we can't afford basic repairs, it stings. I understand, Seren said quietly. Do you? She looked up at him. I was sold to fix my father's debts. I didn't want to come here. I didn't want any of this. But I'm here now and I'll deal with it. I don't expect anyone to like me or accept me. I just expect to be left alone. Garrett studied her for a long moment. You've got some spine, at least. That's something. Is it enough? In the north, maybe. Maybe not. We'll see. The red-haired beta who'd brought Seren to breakfast reappeared in the doorway. Garrett, Mara wants you. North Tower. Now. Garrett stood, grabbing his bowl. Welcome to the frontier, Southern girl. Try not to die before dinner. He left. Seren sat alone at the long table, surrounded by empty chairs and the weight of 100 unspoken judgments. She finished her porridge mechanically, then sat there staring at the empty bowl, trying to figure out what she was supposed to do with the rest of her day. No one had given her instructions. No one had outlined duties or expectations beyond don't cause trouble. A kitchen worker, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes, approached to collect the dishes. You'll want warmer clothes, the woman said quietly, not quite looking at Seren. What you're wearing won't cut it when you go outside. There should be something in your room by midday. Thank you, Seren said. The woman nodded and disappeared back into the kitchen. At least someone here wasn't openly hostile. She spent the rest of the morning exploring. Not the fortress. She remembered Mara's warning about getting lost, but her immediate surroundings. The corridor outside her room, the staircase that led down to what looked like a storage area, the courtyard visible through a narrow window at the end of the hall. Everything was cold. Everything was gray. Everything felt like it was waiting for something to happen. Around midday, she returned to her room and found a package on her bed, just as the kitchen worker had promised. Inside were clothes, practical ones, thick wool pants that actually fit, leather boots lined with fur that came up to her knees, a heavy coat made of some kind of animal hide, probably wolf or bear, that weighed more than anything she'd ever worn but radiated warmth even before she put it on. Gloves, a scarf, even a hat with ear flaps that made her look ridiculous but would clearly save her life in a blizzard. No note, no explanation. She changed into the warmer clothes, grateful despite herself. Whoever had arranged this, Ronan, Mara, or someone else entirely, had at least made sure she wouldn't freeze to death in the first week. That afternoon, bored and restless, and unable to stand the four walls of her room any longer, she ventured down to the courtyard. The cold hit her like a physical force, but the new coat helped. She pulled it tight and walked along the perimeter, staying close to the walls like Mara had instructed. The fortress was bigger than she'd realized. Multiple buildings connected by covered walkways, towers at each corner, their dark windows staring out at the frozen landscape like dead eyes. A stable that looked half collapsed, what might have been a training yard, now buried under 3 feet of snow. She was studying one of the towers, trying to figure out its purpose, when she heard voices drifting from an open doorway. "Don't care what he says, it's a waste. Keep your voice down." Why? Everyone knows it's true, she's useless, a Southern Omega who probably can't even survive a real winter, let alone contribute anything meaningful. And he paid how much for her? Seren stopped walking, her breath catching. "The Alpha made his choice," another voice said, older, male, weary. "We follow his orders, that's how this works." "His orders are getting worse," the first voice continued, anger building. "First he withdraws from the council meetings. Then he stops training the new recruits. Then he barely leaves his quarters for months. Now he's buying brides like he's trying to pretend everything's fine when this whole place is falling apart around us." "Careful, Vec. That's treasonous talk. It's honest talk. Someone needs to say it. We're dying here, slowly, quietly, but we're dying. And instead of facing that reality, he throws money at a contract marriage that means nothing." Seren pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding, unable to stop listening even though she knew she should walk away. "The Alpha's been different since the battle," a third voice added, younger and uncertain. "You know he has. He barely speaks, barely eats. Mara runs everything now, makes all the real decisions. Maybe he's not what? Not fit to lead anymore?" Beck laughed bitterly. "We all know it. We're just too afraid to admit it out loud because without him, without the Virek name, this fortress doesn't exist. The other clans would carve up the territory in a week. But buying an Omega isn't going to fix what's broken inside him. It's just theater. A desperate attempt to look normal when everything is anything but. What would you suggest then? Abandoning the fortress? Scattering to the other clans and hoping they'll take us in? I'm suggesting we face reality instead of clinging to delusions. The war crippled him. Not just his body, his mind, his will, his ability to lead. He's a ghost of who he was, and we're all pretending otherwise because the alternative is too terrifying to consider. And the girl, what about her? She's collateral damage. She'll realize what this place really is within a month and either run or break. Either way, it won't matter. This fortress is finished. It's just a question of how long we can pretend it's not. Footsteps approached the doorway. Seren turned and walked quickly in the opposite direction, her face burning despite the cold, her hands shaking inside her gloves. So that was how they saw her. Not even as a person, as a waste of resources, a symptom of their Alpha's deteriorating judgment, a countdown timer to inevitable failure. She shouldn't have been surprised, but it still hurt, still made her feel small and stupid and worthless. She made it back to her room and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. "They're right," a voice in her head whispered. "You don't belong here. You're not strong enough for this place. You should run before it kills you." But another voice, quieter but fiercer, pushed back. "And go where? Do what? You ran out of choices the moment your father signed those papers. This is your reality now. You either survive it or you don't." That evening, Mara came to her room just as the sun was setting. Not that there was much sun to speak of, just a gradual dimming of the gray sky. "The Alpha will see you now," she said without preamble. Seren's stomach dropped. "Now?" "That's what I said. Follow me." They walked through the fortress, climbing stairs Seren hadn't seen before, moving deeper into the main tower. The air grew colder the higher they went, which didn't seem physically possible, but it did. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that made the stone seem alive. Finally, Mara stopped in front of a massive iron-bound door with symbols carved into the wood. Northern clan marks, probably, though Seren didn't know enough to interpret them. "Inside," Mara said. "He's waiting." Aren't you coming in?
No. This is between you and him. Mara's expression softened slightly, the first hint of something other than cold efficiency Seren had seen from her. Word of advice: don't try to impress him. Don't act weak or submissive or scared. He hates games and performance. Just be direct. Say what you mean. He'll respect that more than any amount of flattery or deference. That's it? That's it. And don't stare at the scars. He notices, and he hates it.
Mara knocked once on the door, 3 sharp raps, then walked away, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Seren stood alone in front of the door, her heart hammering. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, reached for the handle, pushed it open. The room inside was huge, a circular chamber with windows all around showing nothing but snow and darkening sky. A fire burned in a massive stone hearth, the only source of warmth, crackling and spitting. Maps covered one wall, pinned and overlapping, showing territories and routes and strategic positions. Weapons hung on another wall, swords, axes, spears, things she didn't have names for, all of them well-maintained and clearly functional rather than decorative. And in the center of the room, standing with his back to her, staring out one of the windows, was Alpha Ronan Virak. He was tall, taller than Kale, broader through the shoulders despite the injury that had supposedly crippled him. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples, pulled back loosely at the nape of his neck. He wore simple clothes, black shirt, dark pants, boots, nothing ceremonial or ostentatious. He didn't turn around. "Close the door," he said. His voice was deep, rough, like he didn't use it often, or like it had been damaged along with everything else. Seren closed the door behind her. Silence. She stood there, waiting, unsure what to do or say. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside the windows. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned. The first thing she noticed was the scar. It ran from his left temple down across his eye and cheek, a raised line of damaged tissue that looked like it had been sewn back together by someone with more determination than skill. The eye itself was intact but clouded, the iris pale and unfocused, clearly damaged beyond repair. The right side of his face was unmarked, handsome in a harsh, angular way. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, the kind of features that would have made him striking before the war. But it was the left side that told the real story. Violence, pain, survival against impossible odds. The second thing she noticed was the way he moved. Slowly, carefully. His left leg dragging slightly, compensating for damage that had never fully healed. Every step looked like it cost him something. The third thing she noticed was his eyes. The right one, at least. Pale gray, sharp, and assessing. It pinned her in place like a blade. There was intelligence there, awareness, an exhaustion so deep it seemed to go all the way down to his bones. "So you're the one," he said, studying her with that single functioning eye. "Seren Ashvale," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the way her pulse was racing. "Though I assume you already know that. I know what your father told me. Rejected by Alpha Draymore, considered unfit for bonding. Medical anomalies no one could explain. Difficult temperament." He paused. "He was very eager to be rid of you. Made me wonder what I was actually getting. And now that you see me..." He moved toward a table where a bottle and 2 glasses sat, amber liquid catching the firelight. He poured carefully, his movements precise despite the obvious difficulty. "I see someone who's angry, scared, trying very hard to pretend she's neither." Seren felt exposed, like he'd peeled back her skin and looked directly at what she was trying to hide. He handed her one of the glasses. She took it, but didn't drink. "You paid a fortune for me. Did you get your money's worth?" "I don't know yet. That depends on whether you survive the next few months. And if I don't, then I wasted resources we don't have on a gamble that didn't pay off." He leaned against the table, still watching her with that unnerving intensity. "But I don't think you will." "Won't what? Survive?" "No, I think you will. You've got something most people don't." "What's that?" "Spite." He took a drink. "I've seen enough people break to recognize the ones who won't. You're angry at the world, at your father, at the situation you're in. That anger will keep you alive when comfort and hope would get you killed." Seren wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "What do you want from me?" she asked bluntly. "Honestly?" Ronan set down his glass.
I'm not entirely sure. I needed an Omega. The Council's been pressuring me for over a year to secure a bond, to show stability, to prove I'm still capable of leading and planning for the future. They think a mate will help morale, prove I'm still fit to command. And are you? His expression hardened. Careful. You told me to be direct. So I did. He was quiet for a moment, then said, No, I'm not fit to lead. Not anymore. The battle broke things inside me that won't heal. But I'm all they have, so they're stuck with me. And I'm stuck trying to hold this place together with nothing but stubbornness and reputation. The honesty startled her. She'd expected deflection, posturing, the kind of political non-answers alphas specialized in. Why tell me that? She asked quietly. Because you're stuck with me too. Might as well know what you're dealing with. He straightened, wincing slightly. This isn't a real marriage, Seren. It's a contract, a transaction. You provide legitimacy and stability, at least on paper. Your presence satisfies the Council's demands and makes me look less like a broken alpha desperately clinging to power. I provide protection, resources, and a name that still carries weight in the North. We fulfill the terms, satisfy appearances, and otherwise stay out of each other's way. That's it? That's it. I'm not expecting companionship or affection or whatever romanticized nonsense Southern houses sell to their daughters. I'm expecting you to survive here, to not cause problems, and to show up when appearances matter. Beyond that, what you do with your time is your business. And if I don't want that, if I want something different, then you shouldn't have come. His voice was flat, final. But you did? So now we both deal with the consequences. Seren felt anger flare hot in her chest. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Ronan said, his tone almost bored now. You chose to get in that carriage. You could have run, could have refused the contract, could have thrown yourself off a bridge if you were that desperate to escape. You don't know anything about my situation. I know enough. You were a pawn in your father's game, and instead of fighting, instead of taking control of your own fate, you let yourself be moved around the board like a piece with no will of its own. I was trying to survive, and now you're here, still trying to survive, still letting other people decide what happens to you, where you go, who you become. He moved closer, his single eye boring into her. That stops now. In this fortress, you don't get to be passive. You don't get to wait for someone to save you or fix things or make decisions on your behalf. You survive on your own merit or you don't survive at all. There's no middle ground here. Is that a threat? It's a fact. The North doesn't care about your feelings or your past or your pain. It'll kill you without hesitation if you're weak. So if you want to make it here, you need to get stronger, faster, harder. You need to become someone who can't be broken. Seren met his gaze, refusing to look away despite the urge to flinch. And if I can't, then you'll die, and I'll have wasted a fortune on a corpse. He turned back to the window. There's a ceremony in 3 days. A public binding to make the contract official in the eyes of the clans. You'll stand beside me, say the words, and play the part of a dutiful Omega accepting her alpha. After that, you're free to do whatever you want, as long as you don't embarrass me or cause chaos that undermines what little authority I have left. That's all you want? A performance? That's all I need. Seren set down the untouched glass, the amber liquid sloshing slightly. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone crueler, someone who enjoyed this, someone who'd want to use me. She hesitated on the last words. I don't enjoy anything anymore, Ronan said quietly, still facing the window. I'm just trying to hold this place together for the people who still believe in it, who stayed when they could have left, who deserve better than watching everything collapse. You're a piece of that puzzle, a necessary component, nothing more. Then we understand each other. Do we? Yes. You don't want me here. I don't want to be here. We're both trapped in a situation neither of us chose. The only difference is I'm honest about hating it. For the first time, something almost like a smile crossed the unmarked side of Ronan's face. You've got fire, I'll give you that. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Whether that fire is useful or destructive remains to be seen. He moved toward the door, clearly dismissing her. Mara will prepare you for the ceremony. Do what she says. Don't argue with her. She's kept this place running when I couldn't, and she deserves respect.
and try not to die before the binding. It would be inconvenient.
I'll do my best, Seren said coldly. She walked to the door, her hand on the handle, then paused. Can I ask you something?
You can ask. I might not answer.
Why did you really buy me? And don't say it was just for the council or appearances. There's something else, I can see it. Ronan was silent for a long moment, his damaged profile catching the firelight.
Because I needed to prove I could still make decisions, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. That I wasn't completely broken. That there was still something worth fighting for in this place. Still a reason to keep going instead of just giving up. He looked at her, both eyes functional and damaged, reflecting the flames. Whether I was right or wrong about that, I don't know. But it's done now. We both have to live with it.
Seren nodded slowly and left, closing the heavy door behind her.
The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like military training than wedding planning. Mara drilled her on the ceremony, what to say, where to stand, how to hold herself, which clan representatives would be present, and which ones would be looking for any sign of weakness to exploit. It was all ritual and theater, performance designed to convince the watching clans that Virik's fortress was still strong, still stable, still worth respecting instead of conquering. Seren hated every second of it, but she learned. She practiced the words until she could say them in her sleep. She memorized the positions, the gestures, the symbolic exchanges that meant nothing to her, but everything to Northern tradition. On the morning of the ceremony, Kira brought her a dress. It was beautiful, deep blue wool the color of twilight, with silver embroidery along the collar and cuffs that caught the light. Cut in the Northern style with long sleeves and a high collar, practical enough to provide warmth, but elegant enough to signal status. Don't thank me, Kira said before Seren could speak. It's just for appearances. After today, you can go back to being useless. The words stung, but Seren just nodded and took the dress. When she put it on and looked in the small, cracked mirror in her room, she barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked like someone who belonged in the North. Someone harder. Someone different. The ceremony was held in the main hall, which had been cleared and cleaned for the occasion. Torches blazed in every sconce. The stone floor had been scrubbed. Even the air felt different, charged with expectation and judgment. Dozens of people had gathered, guards, workers, kitchen staff, and most importantly, a handful of clan representatives from nearby territories who'd made the dangerous trip specifically to witness the binding and report back to their own leaders about Virik's stability. Seren stood beside Ronan at the front of the hall, acutely aware of every eye on her, every whispered comment just barely out of earshot. Ronan looked different in ceremonial armor, black steel etched with Northern symbols, polished until it gleamed. Still damaged, still scarred, but imposing in a way that reminded everyone present he'd once been a legendary warrior who'd held the frontier against impossible odds. An elder stepped forward to perform the binding. He was ancient, his face a map of wrinkles, his voice thin but steady with the weight of tradition. Alpha Ronan Virik, he began, his words carrying through the silent hall. Do you claim this Omega as your bonded mate, to protect and provide for according to the old laws of our people? I do, Ronan said, his voice carrying through the hall with more strength than Seren had heard from him before. Omega Seren Ashvale, do you accept this Alpha as your bonded mate, to honor and support according to the old laws of our people? Seren's throat was dry. The words felt like ash and lies, but she said them anyway. I do. The elder nodded, producing a ceremonial cord, red silk, traditional, probably older than everyone in the room. He tied it around their joined hands, wrapping it in a complex pattern that symbolized unity and strength. Then, by the authority of the clans and the laws of our ancestors, I bind you together. May your union bring strength to this house and prosperity to your people. The hall erupted in polite applause that felt more obligatory than celebratory. It was done. Seren was officially bound to a man she barely knew, in a place that hated her, playing a role in a performance no one truly believed. The feast afterward was awkward and tense. Long tables had been set up, food brought out, more than Seren had seen since arriving, which made her wonder where it had been hidden. People congratulated them with words that sounded hollow. Ronan barely spoke, his presence more obligation than participation. Seren sat beside him at the head table, smiling when required, saying nothing when possible, Feeling like an actor in a play she hadn't auditioned for, Garrett approached at one point, raising a cup. To the Alpha and his mate, may your bond bring warmth to the north. Others echoed the toast, drinking deeply. Seren sipped her wine and wished she were anywhere else. When it was finally over, when the last guest had left and the hall had emptied, she escaped to her room and collapsed on the bed, still wearing the blue dress, too exhausted to change. She'd survived the ceremony, but something felt wrong, a pressure in the air, a tension she couldn't name, like the moment before a storm breaks. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't settle. Around midnight, she was jerked awake by shouting. She bolted upright, heart racing, disoriented. More shouting, the clash of steel, running footsteps in the corridor outside. She threw on her coat over the dress and yanked open the door. Chaos. Guards running toward the main gates, weapons drawn, armor half-fastened. Someone screamed orders she couldn't make out over the noise. Garrett ran past her room, blood on his shoulder. "What's happening?" Seren called out. "Raiders!" he shouted back without stopping. "They're hitting the north gate. Get back inside and bar your door." Raiders. Seren's blood went cold. She should have listened, should have stayed in her room like he said, locked the door, hidden under the bed like a sensible person. Instead, she followed. She ran through the corridors, following the sound of battle, her pulse thundering in her ears, some reckless instinct overriding common sense. She reached the courtyard just as the north gate exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal. Men poured through this breach. Alphas, all of them, armed with axes and swords, moving with the coordinated precision of fighters who'd done this before. At least 20 of them, maybe more. The fortress guards met them head-on, steel clashing against steel, the sound deafening. Blood sprayed across the white snow, painting it red. Seren pressed herself against a wall, frozen, unable to look away. This was real. This was happening. People were dying right in front of her. Someone screamed, a guard she'd seen in the dining hall, clutching a wound in his side. She saw Mara fighting 3 raiders at once, her movements precise and deadly, her blade a blur of silver in the torchlight. She saw Garrett go down, a raider's axe catching his shoulder, blood flowing. She saw Ronan emerge from the main building, limping but armed with a massive sword, his face twisted in rage and pain, and something that looked almost like relief, like he'd been waiting for this, for a chance to fight instead of slowly rotting. One of the raiders, massive, scarred, clearly the leader, pointed at Ronan and laughed, the sound carrying across the courtyard. "The cripple comes to fight," he bellowed, his voice full of contempt. "I heard you were broken, Virek. Looks like the rumors were true. Thought you'd put up more of a fight than this." Ronan didn't respond. He just attacked, his sword swinging in an arc that would have taken the raider's head off if it had connected. But the raider was fast, ducking under the blow and countering with his own weapon. The fight was brutal. Ronan was slower than he should have been, his left side clearly weak, his damaged leg throwing off his balance. But he was still skilled, still dangerous, still fighting with the kind of precision that came from decades of training and combat. The raider leader matched him blow for blow, grinning the whole time like this was entertainment. "You're finished, Virek," the raider shouted between strikes. "Your fortress is dying. Your people are abandoning you. Everyone knows it. And you bring in a southern whore to pretend everything's fine." He drove Ronan back, forcing him toward the wall, pressing the advantage. Seren saw it happening, saw Ronan stumbling, his damaged leg giving out, his guard dropping for just a second. The raider raised his blade for a killing blow. Something inside Seren snapped. Not thought, not decision, not courage or strategy or anything rational, pure instinct. She ran forward, grabbing a fallen sword from the snow. It was too heavy, awkward in her hands, the balance all wrong for someone who'd never held a weapon in her life. She didn't care. She swung it at the raider's back with everything she had, putting all her weight and terror and rage behind it. The blade connected with his armor, the impact jarring her arm so hard she nearly dropped it. The raider roared, spinning toward her, his face contorting with shock and then fury. His eyes widened as he took her in. "An Omega? You brought an Omega to a fight?" He backhanded her across the face. Seren flew backward, hitting the ground hard, the sword clattering away. Pain exploded through her skull, white-hot and blinding. She tasted blood. The raider advanced, still laughing, raising his weapon. "Pathetic," he spat. Then something happened. A surge of heat inside her chest. A pressure building, building, until it felt like her ribs would crack, like her skin would split open, like something enormous was trying to claw its way out of her. The air around her shimmered, distorting like heat waves. The raider stopped, his smile faltering. What the? The pressure exploded outward. A shockwave of pure force slammed into the raider, lifting him off his feet like he weighed nothing and throwing him 20 feet backward into the stone wall. He hit with a sickening crunch and crumpled to the ground, not moving. Silence. Absolute crushing silence. Every fighter, guard and raider alike, stopped. Weapons lowered. Every eye turned to Seren. She knelt in the snow, gasping for air, her hands glowing with a faint silver light that pulsed and faded, even as she stared at them in horror. What the hell just happened? What did I just do? Ronan was staring at her, his expression unreadable, his sword still raised. Mara had lowered her weapon completely, eyes wide with something that looked like fear. The remaining raiders backed away slowly, their bravado evaporating, fear replacing aggression. One of them pointed at Seren with a shaking hand. She can't be. They ran, all of them, abandoning their fallen leader, scrambling back through the broken gate and disappearing into the night. And Seren, still on her knees in the blood-stained snow, her hands still tingling with phantom energy, realized with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. Whatever she was, whatever had just happened, there was no going back now. Ronan reached her first. He moved faster than she'd thought possible for someone with his injuries, dropping his sword and gripping her shoulders with hands that shook slightly. "What did you do?" His voice was low, urgent. "Seren, what the hell did you just do?" She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. Her hands were still tingling, the silver light completely gone now, but the sensation lingering like frostbite in reverse, burning instead of freezing. I don't know," she managed. Mara appeared beside them, her blade still drawn, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond the broken gate. "They're gone. For now. But they'll be back, and they'll bring more." She looked down at Seren. "Get her inside, now, before the others start asking questions we can't answer." "Too late for that," Garrett said, limping over, blood still seeping through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder. Behind him, a dozen guards stood in a loose semicircle, weapons lowered but not sheathed, staring at Seren like she'd grown a second head. One of them, a young alpha named Vec, the same one she'd overheard complaining days ago, stepped forward. "What is she?" "Shut your mouth, Vec," Mara snapped. "I'm serious. Omegas don't do that. They can't. I've been fighting for 15 years and I've never seen anything like—" "I said shut it." "She threw Karn into a wall without touching him." Vec's voice rose, fear bleeding through the anger. "He's dead. I checked. Neck broken, ribs caved in. And she did it with, what? Air? Magic? What the fuck is she?" "Enough!" Ronan's voice cracked like a whip. "All of you, stand down. Get the wounded to the infirmary. Repair the gate. Clear the bodies. Move." They hesitated. For a terrible moment, Seren thought they might refuse, might turn on her, on both of them. The tension stretched so tight it felt like the air itself might shatter. Then Garrett barked, "You heard the Alpha. Move your asses." The spell broke. The guards scattered, some helping the wounded, others dragging the dead raiders toward the gate to be dumped outside the walls. Northern custom, leaving enemies for the wolves. But they kept glancing back at her, fear in their eyes, suspicion. Ronan pulled Seren to her feet. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then walk, fast." He half led, half dragged her across the courtyard, Mara flanking them, her hand never leaving her sword hilt. They entered the main building through a side entrance, climbing the stairs to Ronan's chamber in the tower. He slammed the door behind them and locked it. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Seren sank into a chair by the fire, her legs giving out. Her face throbbed where the raider had hit her. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Tell me everything," Ronan said, pacing in front of the hearth. "From the beginning, every detail." "There's nothing to tell. I saw him about to kill you. I grabbed a sword, he hit me, and then—" She stopped, struggling to put it into words. "Something inside me broke open, or woke up. I don't know. It felt like pressure, like something had been locked away and suddenly wasn't anymore, and it just came out." "How long have you been able to do this?" "I haven't. I've never. This is the first time anything like that has ever happened to me." Mara crossed her arms. "Medical anomalies.
That's what her file said. Irregular heats, unstable scent, blood work that didn't make sense. You read my medical file? Seren said. Of course I did. I read everything about you before you arrived. Mara's expression was unreadable. But those reports didn't mention anything about this. Power like that doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Maybe it does, Ronan said quietly. He'd stopped pacing, was staring at Seren with that unsettling intensity. Maybe it was always there, suppressed, dormant. Suppressed how? I don't know. Medication? Environment? Fear? He ran a hand through his hair. There are old stories, legends from before the clans organized, before the houses formed, stories about omegas with abilities that went beyond biology, strength, influence, power that didn't come from physical dominance but from something else entirely. Those are fairy tales, Mara said flatly. Are they? We just watched her kill a man twice her size without touching him. Silence fell again. Seren's mind was reeling. This doesn't make sense. If I had this thing inside me my whole life, why didn't it show up before? Why now? Trauma, Ronan said. Extreme stress, life-threatening danger. Those are the triggers in the old stories. The power only manifests when there's no other option, when survival demands it. That's convenient, Seren muttered. It's not convenience, it's adaptation, evolution, whatever you want to call it. He moved closer, crouching in front of her chair so they were eye level. Listen to me carefully. What happened tonight? What those guards saw that spreads. By morning, every person in this fortress will know. By tomorrow night, the neighboring clans will know. Within a week, the entire North will be talking about the Southern Omega who threw a raider through a wall. So what do? We control the narrative, Mara said. We make this work for us instead of against us. How? By making you into exactly what they're already afraid you are. She looked at Ronan. The clans have been circling this fortress for months, waiting for us to collapse. They think we're weak, vulnerable, ready to be carved up. But if they believe we have something they don't, someone they don't, they'll think twice before attacking, Ronan finished. Fear is a weapon, and right now, they're afraid of you. Seren stood up, anger cutting through the confusion and fear. I'm not a weapon. I'm not a tool you can use to... You became a weapon the moment you killed that raider, Mara interrupted coldly. Whether you like it or not, you're a threat now. The only question is whether you're a threat they fear and respect, or a threat they eliminate before it grows stronger. The words hit like ice water. She's right, Ronan said. This fortress, these people, they're hanging by a thread. The battle 3 years ago didn't just cripple me. It broke something fundamental. Our reputation, our alliances, our ability to defend ourselves. We've been surviving on momentum and fear of my name, but that's running out. What you did tonight, that changes things, that gives us leverage. I didn't ask for this. No one asked for power. It just shows up and demands you make a choice. His gray eye held hers. You can hide from it, pretend it doesn't exist, hope it goes away. Or you can learn to use it, control it, become something these northern bastards have to reckon with. I don't even know what it is. Then we figure it out, together. He stood, wincing as his bad leg protested. But we do it fast because word is already spreading and we have maybe 72 hours before the clans start making moves. A knock at the door made all three of them tense. Garrett's voice came through the wood. Alpha, Council's demanding an emergency session. They want answers about what happened. Mara swore under her breath. Ronan called back. Tell them 1 hour. Main hall. They're not going to like waiting. They don't have to like it. 1 hour, Garrett. Footsteps retreated. Ronan turned back to Seren. The Council runs this fortress as much as I do now. They'll want to know what you are, whether you're dangerous, whether keeping you here is worth the risk. And if they decide I'm not, then we have a problem. He moved toward his weapons wall, selecting a knife in a worn leather sheath, handed it to her. Keep this on you. Always. If things go badly, don't hesitate to use it. Seren took the knife, the weight of it foreign and heavy. You think they'd try to kill me? I think frightened people do stupid things, and right now, they're very frightened. The main hall was packed. Not just the Council, a group of 7 older alphas and betas who'd helped govern the fortress for decades, but seemingly everyone who could walk. Guards, workers, kitchen staff,
even a few children peeking around their parents' legs, all of them staring at Seren as she entered beside Ronan and Mara. The council sat at a long table at the front. Their leader, an alpha named Torvin with white hair and a face like granite, stood as they approached. Alpha Virik, Omega Ashvale, we appreciate you making time for us. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. Ronan didn't react. You called this session. Say what you need to say. Torvin gestured to the crowd. Our people are frightened. They witnessed something tonight that defies explanation, and they're looking to us, to you, for answers. What do you want to know? What is she? This came from another council member, a beta woman named Sarah. Is she Omega? Something else? Some kind of weapon you've been hiding? I wasn't hiding anything, Ronan said evenly. I didn't know about her abilities until tonight. Convenient. It's the truth. Then explain it, Torvin pressed. Explain how an Omega, supposedly the weakest designation, killed an experienced raider without touching him. I can't explain it. Not yet. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Seren could feel the weight of their fear, their suspicion, pressing down on her like physical force. Mara stepped forward. What we know is this. She defended the Alpha when he was vulnerable. She eliminated a threat to this fortress. Whether we understand how she did it or not, the result is the same. One less enemy and one more reason for the other clans to think twice before attacking us. Or one more reason for them to unite against us, Sarah countered. If word spreads that we're harboring something unnatural. Unnatural? Seren heard herself say. Every eye snapped to her. I'm standing right here. You could at least insult me to my face instead of talking around me like I'm not in the room. Sarah's expression hardened. You want directness? Fine. You're dangerous, unpredictable. You represent a threat not just to our enemies, but potentially to everyone in this fortress. How do we know you won't lose control? Won't turn that power against us? You don't, Seren said. Just like I don't know that you won't decide I'm too risky to keep alive and slit my throat while I'm sleeping. We're all taking chances here. This isn't a joke. Do I look like I'm laughing? Seren moved forward, her hands clenched into fists. You want to know what I am? I have no idea. You want to know if I can control it? I don't know that either. But what I do know is that I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this, and I'm just as scared as you are. The difference is I'm not hiding behind a council table pointing fingers. Torvin slammed his hand on the table. Watch your tone, girl. You may have power, but you're still in our house, subject to our laws. Then make it official, Seren shot back. Put me on trial if you think I'm such a threat. Exile me. Execute me. Do whatever you think you need to do. But stop pretending this is about safety when it's really about fear. The hall erupted. Voices shouting over each other, some calling for her removal, others defending her, surprisingly, including Garrett, whose voice rose above the chaos. She saved the Alpha's life. That counts for something. Ronan let it continue for 30 seconds, then slammed his sword against the stone floor. The metallic clang silenced the room. Enough, he said quietly, but the word carried. Here's what's going to happen. Seren stays. She's my bonded mate by law and custom. Anyone who wants to challenge that can take it up with me directly. Ronan, Torvin said carefully, we're not questioning your authority. We're questioning the wisdom of... I don't care about your wisdom. I care about this fortress surviving the next 6 months. And right now, she's the best chance we have. He looked around the room. The raiders tonight didn't come for supplies or territory. They came to test us, to see if the rumors were true, to confirm we're as weak as everyone says. And they got their answer, but not the one they expected. They'll come back with more, Sarah said. Let them. This time we'll be ready. Ronan's voice was steel. Seren will train, learn to control her abilities, and when the clans hear that the crippled Alpha of the North has bonded with an Omega who can kill with a thought, they'll reconsider their plans. Or they'll unite to destroy us, Torvin said. Then we'll fight, like we always have. He turned to Seren. But I need to know. Are you willing to do this? To become what they're afraid of? She should have said no. Should have demanded to leave, to go somewhere safer, somewhere she wouldn't be a target or a weapon or a political tool. But looking around the hall, at the faces watching her, some hostile, some hopeful, some just exhausted, she realized she didn't have anywhere else to go. This was it. This was her chance to stop being a pawn and become something else. "I'll do it," she said, "on one condition." "Name it."
"You teach me to fight. Really fight. Not just use whatever this is." She held up her hands. "But with weapons, strategy, everything. I'm tired of being helpless. I'm tired of waiting to be saved or sold or used. If I'm going to survive here, I do it on my terms." A slow smile crossed Ronan's scarred face. "Deal."
Torvin looked between them, clearly unhappy but recognizing a lost battle. "Fine. But if she loses control, if she hurts anyone in this fortress, the consequences fall on both of you." "Understood." The council dismissed, but the crowd lingered, whispering, watching. Seren felt their eyes on her as she left the hall, fear and curiosity and calculation all mixed together. Back in Ronan's chamber, Mara poured 3 glasses of something that smelled like it could strip paint. "That went better than expected," she said. "They're terrified," Seren said. "Good. Fear breeds caution. Caution keeps you alive."
Mara handed her a glass. "Drink. You're going to need it." "Why?" "Because training starts at dawn, and I don't believe in gentle introductions." Mara hadn't been lying. The next morning, before the sun was even a rumor on the horizon, she dragged Seren out of bed and down to what passed for a training yard, a flat stretch of packed snow behind the stables. "First lesson," Mara said, tossing Seren a wooden practice sword. "You're weak, slow, untrained. Every person in this fortress could kill you in a straight fight. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm not here to encourage you. I'm here to keep you alive." Mara drew her own practice blade. "Attack me." "What?" "You heard me. Attack." Seren hefted the wooden sword. It was heavier than it looked. She took a clumsy swing at Mara's midsection. Mara sidestepped easily and cracked the blade against Seren's ribs. Pain exploded through her side. "Dead. Again." Seren tried a different angle. Same result. Mara dodged, countered, struck her shoulder hard enough to make her drop the sword. "Dead. Again." This continued for an hour. By the end, Seren was bruised, exhausted, and furious. "I can't win," she gasped, bent over, trying to catch her breath. "Not yet," Mara agreed. "But you will. Eventually." She picked up Seren's dropped sword and tossed it back to her. "The goal isn't to beat me today. It's to not die. There's a difference. Now. Again." They trained every morning for a week. Sword work, hand-to-hand combat, how to fall without breaking bones, how to get up fast when you're knocked down. Seren's body became a map of bruises, but slowly, incrementally, she got better. Started anticipating Mara's moves, lasted longer before getting disarmed. In the afternoons, Ronan worked with her on the other thing, the power she still didn't understand. "Close your eyes," he instructed. They were in his chamber, the fire crackling. "Feel for it, the same pressure you felt during the fight." Seren tried. Felt nothing but frustration. "It's not there. It's always there. You just don't know how to access it consciously yet." He moved behind her, his voice low and steady. "Think about what you were feeling when it happened. The fear, the rage, the absolute need to survive." She focused, trying to recreate that moment. The terror of watching Ronan about to die. The helplessness. The fury. Something flickered inside her chest, small, distant. "There," Ronan said. "You felt that, didn't you?" "Maybe. I don't know." "Try to hold on to it. Don't force it. Just acknowledge it's there." This was harder than the physical training. The power was slippery, temperamental, refusing to appear when she wanted it, and sometimes flaring unexpectedly when she didn't. Twice she accidentally shattered the water pitcher when her emotions spiked. Once she knocked over a chair without touching it. Progress. But chaotic. Meanwhile, word spread. Exactly as Ronan had predicted, stories about the Southern Omega with unnatural power rippled through the northern clans. Embellished, distorted, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Some said she could kill with a glance. Others claimed she'd destroyed an entire raiding party single-handedly. A few whispered she was possessed by ancient spirits. The truth didn't matter, the fear did. And fear, as Mara had said, bred caution. For 2 weeks, no more attacks came, but the tension kept building. Then, on the 15th day after the raid, a messenger arrived.
Seren was in the training yard sparring with Garrett, who'd volunteered to help after his shoulder healed, when Mara appeared. "Stop, both of you. Ronan wants you in the hall. Now." They found the main hall filled with people again, but this time the energy was different, excited, nervous. Ronan stood at the front, holding a sealed letter. He looked up when Seren entered. "The clans are calling a gathering," he said without preamble. "A summit. 3 weeks from now, in the neutral territory at Frozen Lake." "That's good, right?" Garrett said. "Means they want to talk instead of fight." "Maybe. Or it's a trap." Mara crossed her arms. "They want to see her. Confirm the rumors." "It's not optional," Ronan said. "The message is clear. If we don't attend, they'll consider it an admission of weakness and move against us." "Then we go," Seren said. Everyone turned to look at her. "It's what they want, isn't it? To see the Southern Omega who can throw raiders through walls? Fine. I'll give them a show." "This isn't a performance," Torvine warned. He was there too, along with most of the council. "These are the most dangerous people in the North. One wrong move, one perceived threat, and they'll tear you apart." "Then I'd better not make a wrong move." Ronan studied her, something like pride in his expression. "You've gotten bolder. I've gotten tired of being afraid." She met his gaze. "You wanted me to become what they fear. This is your chance to prove I can." 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare for the most dangerous moment of her life. 3 weeks to become someone who could walk into a room full of predators and make them blink first. The training intensified. Mara pushed her harder, adding new weapons, knives, axes, even barehanded techniques that relied on leverage instead of strength. Ronan worked with her on control, on summoning the power without rage, on shaping it instead of just releasing it in a destructive burst. She was getting better, stronger, more confident. But was it enough? On the night before they were set to leave for the summit, Seren stood alone in her room, staring at her reflection in the small mirror. The girl looking back wasn't the same person who'd arrived at the fortress 2 months ago. Her face was leaner, harder. Her eyes held something cold and determined. Scars from training marked her hands and forearms. She looked like she belonged in the North now. A knock at the door. Ronan entered without waiting for permission, a habit she'd grown used to. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much thinking." He moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. "Tomorrow changes everything. You know that, right?" "I know." "If the other clans see weakness, if they think you're all rumor and no substance, they'll push, test us, maybe attack outright. I understand the stakes. Do you?" He turned to face her. "Because I need to know. If it comes down to it, if you have to use your power in front of everyone, can you do it? Can you kill again if necessary?" Seren thought about the raider, the way his body had crumpled, the fear in the other raider's eyes. "Yes," she said. "If it means surviving, yes. Good." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you've surprised me. I didn't think you'd last a week, but you've become formidable." It was the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever heard from him. "Don't get sentimental on me now," she said. "It's unsettling." He almost smiled. "Get some rest. We leave at dawn." He left. Seren lay down on the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a gathering of the most powerful people in the North. Tomorrow, she'd have to prove she was more than just rumors and luck. Tomorrow, everything she'd survived so far would either pay off or get her killed. The journey to Frozen Lake took 3 days. They traveled with a small party: Ronan, Mara, Garrett, 4 guards, and Seren. Moving fast through terrain so brutal it made the fortress look welcoming. The cold was beyond anything Seren had experienced. Wind that cut through layers of clothing like they didn't exist. Snow so deep the horses struggled. Night so dark and frozen that even with a fire she could barely feel her extremities. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to slow down or stop early. She'd learned that showing weakness in the North was asking to die. On the 3rd day, as the sun, what little there was of it, began to set, they crested a ridge and saw it. Frozen Lake. A massive expanse of ice surrounded by stone pillars carved with clan symbols. Dozens of tents and temporary structures ringed the shore, smoke rising from fires. hundreds of people moving between them, all the northern clans gathered in one place. "Stay close to me," Ronan said quietly. "Don't speak unless spoken to directly. Don't make eye contact unless you intend to challenge. And whatever you do, don't show fear." I wasn't planning on it. They descended toward the encampment. As they got closer, people stopped what they were doing to watch. Whispers spread like wildfire. Seren kept her head up, her expression neutral, her hand resting on the knife Ronan had given her. They were led to a large tent at the center, the gathering hall where the summit would take place. Inside, at least 50 alphas were already seated in a rough circle. All of them turned to look when Ronan entered. The silence was deafening. Ronan took his seat in the designated spot, Seren standing behind him as was customary for bonded mates. An older alpha with gray braids stood. The summit leader, probably. "Alpha Virik, we're pleased you could join us." "Couldn't miss it," Ronan said evenly. "What's this about?" "I think you know. The North is changing, alliances are shifting, and we've heard interesting rumors about your new mate." All eyes shifted to Seren. "Show us," another alpha demanded. "Show us what she can do." Ronan didn't react. "She's not a performing animal." "Then how do we know the stories are true? How do we know you're not bluffing, using rumors to inflate your position?" The tension ratcheted up. Seren felt it. The challenge, the demand, the test. She stepped forward, moving in front of Ronan. "You want proof?" she said, her voice carrying through the tent. "Pick someone. Anyone. Let them attack me. We'll see what happens." Murmurs erupted. The gray-braided alpha smiled. "Bold. I like it." He gestured to a massive warrior standing near the back. "Krell, you're up." The man who stepped forward was enormous, easily 6.5 feet, built like a bear, scars covering his exposed arms. He grinned at Seren. "This won't take long, little Omega." Seren felt the power inside her stirring, responding to the threat. "Not yet," she told herself. "Wait. Let him get close. Make it count." Krell drew a knife, blunted for sparring, but still dangerous. He lunged. Seren waited until the last possible second, until she could smell his breath, until the blade was inches from her throat. Then she released it. The shockwave hit Krell in the chest, stopping his momentum instantly. He flew backward, crashing into 3 other alphas, all of them going down in a tangle of limbs. Silence. Krell groaned, trying to stand, blood trickling from his nose. Seren stood perfectly still, her hand still raised, silver light dancing around her fingers before fading. "Proof enough?" she asked calmly. The gray-braided alpha stared at her, shock written across his face. Then slowly, he began to laugh. "Well," he said, "this changes things, doesn't it?" The laughter echoed through the tent like thunder, but it wasn't mocking. It was genuine, surprised, even delighted. The gray-braided alpha, whose name Seren would learn was Halvard, clapped his hands together. "In 40 years of leading these gatherings, I've never seen anything like that, not once." Krell finally managed to stand, wiping blood from his nose, his expression caught between humiliation and awe. "She's real," he muttered. "The rumors didn't do it justice." "Sit down, Krell," Halvard said, still grinning. "Your pride will recover." He turned his attention to Seren. "Southern Omega, you've just changed the landscape of northern politics. I hope you understand that." "I understand that I defended myself when challenged," Seren said, keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Nothing more." "Nothing more," she says. Halvard looked around the tent. "This nothing more just put every alpha in this room on notice, including me." Ronan stood, moving to stand beside Seren, not in front of her, she noted, beside her. "The demonstration is over. Now tell us why we're really here. This summit wasn't called to verify rumors." Halvard's smile faded. "You're right. Sit, both of you." Seren sat in the chair that was brought for her, another departure from custom, where Omegas typically stood. No one objected. She'd earned the seat. Halvard gestured to a map spread across a central table. 3 clans have fallen in the last 6 months. Absorbed by larger ones, their territories carved up, their people scattered. The balance we've maintained for decades is collapsing. Because you're all too busy fighting each other instead of preparing for what's coming. Mara said from where she stood behind Ronan. Several alphas bristled at her bluntness, but none challenged it. "What is coming?" Ronan asked. An older woman, an alpha named Brenna, with silver hair and a scar across her throat, leaned forward. "The southern houses are expanding north, slowly, carefully. They're buying land, establishing trade routes, positioning themselves. They think we're too fractured to resist." "They're not wrong," another alpha muttered. "They will be if we unify," Halvard said. "That's why I called this summit, to propose an alliance, a coalition of the northern clans, strong enough to push back against southern expansion and stable enough to end the internal conflicts bleeding us dry." Silence fell as everyone processed this. "You want us to set aside centuries of rivalry," Ronan said slowly. "Just like that." "Not just like that. I want you to recognize reality. Separately, we fall. Together, we survive." Halvard's gaze swept the tent. "But an alliance needs a foundation, a reason for everyone to cooperate beyond simple survival. It needs a symbol." Several pairs of eyes shifted to Seren. She felt it immediately, the calculation, the political maneuvering. "No," Ronan said flatly. "Hear me out," Halvard pressed. "An omega with power that defies everything we thought we knew about our biology. That's unprecedented. That's a legend in the making. If she were to stand as a symbol of northern strength, of what we can become when we stop limiting ourselves to old categories and hierarchies." "I said no." Ronan's voice was ice. "She's not a banner you can wave to rally support." "Actually," Seren interrupted, "maybe I am." Every head turned toward her. Ronan's expression was unreadable. "Seren, think about it," she continued, her mind racing. "They're already afraid of me, already talking about me. If we use that, if I become the symbol Halvard's describing, it gives the Alliance something concrete to rally around, and it makes attacking Viric Fortress, or any clan that joins the coalition, a direct challenge to me." "Which puts a target on your back," Mara said. "The target's already there, has been since the moment I threw that raider through a wall." Seren looked at Ronan. "This gives us a chance to control the narrative instead of just reacting to it." "She's smarter than she looks," Brenna observed. "Careful," Ronan said quietly, but there was warning in it. Brenna raised her hands in mock surrender. "No offense intended, I'm just saying, the girl understands power dynamics better than half the alphas in this tent." "Because I've spent my entire life being used as a political pawn," Seren said. "I know how the game works. The difference now is I'm choosing to play instead of being played." Halvard nodded slowly. "So you're willing to serve as the symbol? To stand as the representation of what this alliance could be?" "On one condition." "Name it." "I'm not just a symbol. I'm a participant. I get a voice in decisions, a seat at whatever council you form, and the authority to actually contribute instead of just standing there looking powerful." She met Halvard's gaze. "You want me to represent the alliance? Then treat me like I matter, not like a trophy." The tent erupted in argument. Half the alphas were shouting that an omega couldn't possibly have that kind of authority. The other half were shouting that maybe old rules needed to change if they wanted to survive. Halvard let it continue for a full minute, then slammed his fist on the table. "Enough!" The noise died. "She's right," Halvard said. "If we're going to change how the North operates, we can't do it halfway. An alliance built on the same hierarchies that got us into this mess won't save us." He looked around the tent. "I propose we grant Seren Ashvale a seat on the Coalition Council. Full voting rights, full participation." "That's insane," one of the younger alphas said. "Is it? She just proved she can defend herself better than most of us. She's bonded to Viric, which ties her to one of the oldest northern bloodlines. And her very existence challenges assumptions that have held us back for generations." Halvard smiled. "Seems like exactly the kind of insanity we need." "I support it," Brenna said immediately. "As do I," said another alpha, a man named Torsten with ritual scars covering his arms. One by one, others added their support. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Ronan leaned close to Seren, his voice barely a whisper. "You're sure about this?" "No," she admitted, "but I'm tired of being afraid to try." "All in favor of granting Seren Ashvale a council seat," Halvard called. Hands went up. Seren counted quickly, 23 out of 47 present. Opposed? 18 hands. Abstaining? 6. "Motion passes," Halvard declared. Welcome to Northern Politics, Omega Ashvale. Try not to die in the first week. Nervous laughter rippled through the tent, but Seren could feel the shift. The power dynamics had just fundamentally changed, and not everyone was happy about it. The summit continued for hours, hammering out details. Which clans would join the coalition? What resources each would contribute? How they'd handle disputes. Seren participated, offering observations when she saw opportunities, staying quiet when she didn't have useful input. Learning. Several alphas tried to test her, asking aggressive questions, challenging her opinions, looking for weakness. She didn't give them any. By the time Halvard called an end to the day's session, Seren was exhausted but exhilarated. She'd survived. More than that, she'd gained ground. Outside the tent, as they walked back toward their camp, Mara fell into step beside her. That was either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. I'll take brilliant. Don't get cocky. Half those alphas are already planning ways to undermine you or remove you. I know, but the other half are willing to give me a chance. That's more than I had yesterday. Ronan had been silent since they left the tent. Now he finally spoke. You've just made yourself one of the most important people in the North, and one of the most vulnerable. I can handle it. Can you? He stopped, turning to face her. Because this isn't training anymore. This is real. Those alphas in there, some of them have been fighting for power their entire lives. They'll see you as a threat, as competition, as something to be eliminated. Then I'll have to be faster, smarter, and more dangerous than they expect. Seren met his gaze. You told me to become what they fear. I'm doing that. I told you that when I thought you'd be fighting from the shadows, not standing in front of an entire coalition as a target. Too late to change course now. He studied her for a long moment. You've changed. Completely. Good. The person I was couldn't have survived this. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Just don't lose yourself entirely in the transformation. There's a difference between adapting and becoming exactly what you hate. I'll worry about that after we survive the next 6 months. The second day of the summit was more productive and less theatrical. Concrete plans took shape. Territory agreements. Trade routes. A communication network to coordinate responses to threats. A joint military force for defense. Seren contributed where she could, suggesting a rotation system for the joint force to prevent any one clan from dominating it, proposing regular gatherings to maintain the alliance instead of letting it fracture during peacetime. Not all her ideas were accepted, but enough were that people started listening when she spoke. On the third day, trouble arrived. A messenger burst into the gathering tent covered in snow and blood. Attack, he gasped. The southern border, 3 settlements burned. House Draymore's forces, they've crossed into our territory. The tent exploded in chaos. Seren's blood went cold. Draymore. Kyle. How many? Halvard demanded. At least 200 soldiers. Maybe more. They hit the settlements at dawn, took everything valuable, killed anyone who resisted. That bastard, Brenna snarled. He's testing us, seeing if the alliance is real or just words. Then we show him it's real, Torsten said, standing. We mobilize every available fighter and push them back. That's exactly what he wants, Ronan said quietly. Everyone turned to him. He wants us to charge in angry and disorganized, to prove we can't actually work together. So what do you suggest? Halvard asked. Let him burn our territory? No, we respond. But strategically, as a unified force, not as individual clans rushing to defend their own interests. The settlements he hit belong to 3 different clans, Brenna noted. If we coordinate the response instead of each clan handling their own territory, we prove the alliance has teeth, Seren finished. We show him and everyone watching that an attack on one is an attack on all. Halvard nodded slowly. Agreed. We mobilize together. Joint command, coordinated strategy. I'll lead the western flank, Torsten offered. I'll take the eastern approach, Brenna added. And the center? Halvard looked around the tent. Ronan straightened. I'll take it, with Virek forces as the core and coalition support. You sure you're up for that? One of the younger alphas asked, not quite mockingly, but close. The temperature in the tent seemed to drop. Ronan's expression didn't change. I held the northern border for 10 years against forces twice this size. I think I can manage a southern lordling playing soldier. No offense intended, the Alpha said quickly. None taken. Ronan turned to Halvard. We move within the hour, fast and coordinated. Hit them before they can consolidate their position. Agreed. Halvard looked at Seren. You'll stay here, under guard. No. This isn't negotiable. Yes, it is. Seren stood. You just made me a symbol of this alliance. If I hide while everyone else fights, what message does that send? That I'm all power and no courage? That I need to be protected like a delicate southern flower?
You could die, Mara said bluntly. So could everyone else going into that fight. The difference is I can actually contribute something useful. Seren looked at Ronan. You've been training me for this. Let me prove it wasn't a waste. Ronan was silent for a long moment. Then, she comes with me. My responsibility. Ronan, Halvard started. My decision. My mate. My responsibility. His tone left no room for argument. Halvard sighed. Fine. But if she dies, the Alliance loses its symbol on day 3. Not a great start. Then I won't die, Seren said with more confidence than she felt. Within the hour, they were moving. 500 fighters, the largest coordinated northern force assembled in decades, riding hard toward the southern border. Seren rode beside Ronan, Mara on her other side. The northern landscape blurred past, snow, rock, more snow. When we engage, Ronan said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, you stay behind the front line. Use your power strategically, not recklessly. Conserve energy, and if things go badly, you run. Understand? I understand you're giving me orders I'm probably going to ignore. Seren, I'll be smart about it. I promise. But I'm not hiding. He looked like he wanted to argue but knew it would be pointless. At least stay close to Mara. She'll keep you alive better than I can right now. The admission of vulnerability cost him something. She could see it in his face. We'll keep each other alive, Seren said. That's how this works. They reached the border settlements as the sun was setting. The destruction was worse than Seren had imagined. Buildings burned down to their foundations. Bodies in the snow, men, women, children. The southern forces had been thorough. They're not here, Garrett reported, returning from a scout. Pulled back south about 2 hours ago. They're camped 5 miles from here, probably celebrating. Then we'll interrupt their celebration, Ronan said. Brenna, take your forces around the eastern ridge. Torsten, you've got the west. I'll approach from the north. We surround them, hit them simultaneously, don't give them a chance to organize. And if they have reinforcements, Torsten asked, then we find out how good this alliance really is. They moved into position as darkness fell. Seren could see the southern camp in the distance, fires burning, tents arranged in neat military rows. They thought they were safe, thought they'd struck a blow against a disorganized, fractured north. They were about to learn otherwise. Ronan raised his hand, waited, watching for the signals from the other flanks. One flash of light from the east. Brenna was ready. Another from the west. Torsten in position. Ronan lowered his hand. They charged. The northern forces hit the camp from 3 sides simultaneously, the coordination perfect. The southern soldiers scrambled for weapons, shouting in confusion, trying to form defensive lines. Too late. The battle was chaos. Seren stayed behind the initial wave like Ronan had ordered, but close enough to see everything, close enough to act if needed. She watched Ronan fight, slower than he must have been before the injury, but still skilled, still deadly. His sword moved with precision, economy of motion. Mara was a blur beside him, her blade finding gaps in armor with surgical accuracy. The southern forces were better equipped, nicer armor, better weapons. But they were used to fighting farmers and merchants, not northern warriors who'd been hardened by generations of brutal survival. The difference showed. Then Seren saw him. Kael. He was in the center of the camp, surrounded by guards, shouting orders. He'd gotten taller somehow, or maybe she'd just forgotten how imposing he was. That arrogant certainty in every movement. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Recognition flashed in his face, then shock. Then something that looked like fear. He pointed at her, shouting something to his guards. 3 of them broke away, heading toward her. Mara moved to intercept, but one of them was faster, a massive alpha with a warhammer. He swung at Seren's head. She ducked, felt the wind from the weapon passing overhead, called on the power. It came instantly now, without hesitation. She thrust her hand forward, releasing a focused blast that hit the alpha square in the chest. He flew backward 10 feet, armor denting inward, crashing into two of his companions. The third guard hesitated, eyes wide. "Run," Seren told him. He ran. Kale was staring at her now, his face pale even in the firelight. She started walking toward him. The battle raged around her, but fighters on both sides seemed to sense something happening and created space. A corridor opened between her and Kyle. "Seren?" His voice carried across the distance. How are you?" "Surprised?" she called back. "You thought I'd die in the north, thought I'd break, thought I was too weak to survive. I never wanted, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She was close now, close enough to see the sweat on his face, the fear in his eyes. "You meant every word. And you know what? You did me a favor, rejecting me, humiliating me, forcing me north. It made me into something you'll never be. I'm an alpha." "You're a coward wearing alpha skin." The power was crackling around her hands now, visible, silver light dancing. "You attack settlements full of civilians. You hide behind your guards. You think strength is just muscle and dominance and the ability to hurt people weaker than you." She raised her hand, the power building. Kale stumbled backward, his guards moving in front of him. "But I'm not going to kill you," Seren said, lowering her hand. The power dissipated. "Because you're not worth it. And because I want you to go back south and tell everyone what you saw here. Tell them the North is unified now. Tell them the weak Omega you rejected has become something they should fear. Tell them if they cross our borders again, they won't be as lucky as you." "This isn't over," Kyle said, trying to salvage some dignity. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked away. Behind her, she heard shouting. The Southern forces retreating, dragging their wounded, abandoning equipment. The Northern coalition didn't pursue. They'd made their point. By the time the sun rose, the Southern forces were gone. The Northern coalition controlled the border, and for the first time in decades, they'd fought as one. Seren stood on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, exhausted, covered in dirt and blood that wasn't hers. Ronan appeared beside her. "You let him go." "I know." "Why?" "Because killing him would have been easy, personal revenge, but letting him carry the message back, that serves the Alliance better." He was quiet for a moment. "You're thinking like a leader now." "I'm thinking like someone who's tired of being underestimated." Below them, the coalition forces were already working together, treating wounded, sharing supplies, celebrating their victory as one. Halvard climbed the ridge to join them. "Well, that went better than expected." "We got lucky," Ronan said. "We got organized. There's a difference." Halvard looked at Seren. "You've given them something to believe in. Hope that things can be different, that the old ways aren't the only ways. I just didn't want to hide while other people fought my battles. Nevertheless, you've become what I hoped you would. A symbol, yes, but also a reality. Proof that change is possible." He paused. "The Alliance is real now, tested in battle. The other clans will take notice." "Good," Seren said. "Let them notice. Let them all see what the North can be when we stop tearing each other apart." She looked out over the assembled forces, alphas and betas working side by side, clans that had been enemies for generations helping each other. 2 months ago, she'd have been a rejected Omega, sold like property, exiled to the frozen North with no hope and no future. Now she stood on a battlefield, having helped forge an alliance that might change the North forever. The girl who'd knelt in chains in House Ashvale's Grand Hall was gone. In her place stood someone harder, stronger, dangerous. Someone who'd stopped waiting to be saved and started saving herself. Someone who'd taken every terrible thing that happened to her and forged it into power. And this was just the beginning. The victory at the border changed everything. Word spread faster than wildfire across the North. The coalition wasn't just talk. It was real, tested in blood and steel. The Southern houses had crossed the line and been thrown back by a unified force that moved as one. And at the center of that unity stood an Omega
who'd thrown enemy soldiers through the air without touching them. Within a week, 3 more clans petitioned to join the alliance. Within 2, it was 7. By the end of the month, nearly every major northern clan had sent representatives to Frozen Lake, seeking membership. The North was consolidating for the first time in recorded history. But not everyone was happy about it. Seren sat in what had become the coalition's permanent council chamber, a massive stone building at Frozen Lake that had been hastily winterized and expanded. 50 clan leaders filled the benches, their voices rising in argument over the latest proposal. "We can't just redistribute territory based on need," an alpha named Vorthen was saying, his face red. "Some of us have held our lands for generations. You're asking us to give up what our ancestors bled for." "I'm asking you to prioritize survival over pride," Seren replied calmly from her seat at the council table. She'd learned over the past month that staying calm when others were shouting gave her an advantage. 3 clans control territory they can't adequately defend or utilize. Meanwhile, 2 others are overcrowded and struggling to feed their people. A simple redistribution would solve both problems. Simple for you to say. You don't have ancestral lands to protect.
You're right, I don't. Maybe that's why I can see the solution clearly instead of being blinded by tradition that's killing you. The chamber erupted in shouts, some supporting her, others condemning her audacity. Halvard, who served as coalition chairman, slammed his fist on the table. "Enough! We vote! All in favor of the territorial redistribution proposal?" Hands went up. Seren counted quickly. 32. Opposed? 15 hands. Abstaining? 3. Motion passes. Halvard looked at Vorthen. "You have 3 months to relocate your people from the eastern holdings. The transition will be supervised to ensure fairness." Vorthen glared at Seren, but said nothing. He'd opposed every proposal she'd made over the past month, and he'd lost every vote. The pattern was becoming clear. The old guard was losing power, and they hated it. After the session ended, Seren found Ronan waiting outside the chamber. "Making enemies again?" he asked. "I prefer to think of it as making necessary changes over the objections of stubborn fools." "That's a diplomatic way of saying you're pissing people off." "If they wanted diplomacy, they shouldn't have given me a council seat." She fell into step beside him as they walked through Frozen Lake's growing settlement. "How are things at the fortress?" "Stable. Garrett's handling day-to-day operations. Mara's drilling the new recruits. We've had 50 volunteers from other clans wanting to train with us since word spread about our fighting style." He glanced at her. "They're calling it the Ashvale method. Your name, not mine." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You developed half the tactical approaches we're teaching. The combination of traditional combat and strategic use of your abilities, it's effective. People want to learn it." They'd been spending less time together over the past month. Ronan managed the fortress and military coordination, while Seren focused on the political framework of the alliance. They saw each other at council sessions and strategic meetings, but the quiet conversations in his chamber had become rare. She missed them, though she'd never admit it out loud. "There's something else," Ronan said, his tone shifting. "We received word from the south. Your father wants to meet with you." Seren stopped walking. "What?" "Lord Ashvale sent a formal request through diplomatic channels. He's asking for a meeting, just the 2 of you on neutral ground." "Why?" "The message didn't say, but I can guess. He's seen what you've become, what you represent. He wants to assess whether you're an asset or a threat to Southern interests." "I don't owe him anything." "I know, but refusing could be seen as weakness or fear." Ronan met her gaze. "You don't have to do this. Just understand the implications either way." Seren was quiet for a long moment, emotions warring inside her, anger at her father for selling her, bitterness over the rejection and humiliation, but also, surprisingly, curiosity about what he'd say now, what excuses he'd offer. "Set it up," she said finally, "but on my terms. I choose the location, I choose who's present, and he comes alone." Done. The meeting was arranged for 1 week later, in a small neutral settlement halfway between Vyrek territory and the southern border. Seren brought Mara and 10 guards. Her father arrived with twice that number, but he left them outside as agreed and entered the meeting hall alone. Lord Ashvale looked older than Seren remembered. Grayer. Thinner. The weight of House Ashvale's continued decline was written in every line on his face. They sat across from each other at a simple wooden table, Mara standing behind Seren, watchful. "You look well," her father said finally. "I'm alive." "That's more than you expected, isn't it?" He flinched. "I never wanted—" "Don't." Seren's voice was flat. "Don't rewrite history. You sold me because you needed money and I was the only asset you had left. You didn't care what happened to me after I left, so don't pretend this was some noble sacrifice." Silence. Lord Ashvale folded his hands on the table. "You're right. I won't insult you with lies or justifications. What I did was pragmatic, necessary for the house's survival. And yes, I didn't expect you to thrive. I thought the North would break you. It almost did. But it didn't. Instead, you've become—" He gestured vaguely. "Whatever you are now. A power player in Northern politics, a symbol of their alliance, someone people actually fear and respect. Is there a point to this? The point is that the South is paying attention. House Draymore is rattled. Kael's failure at the border made him look weak. Other houses are questioning whether Southern expansion is wise when the North has unified behind someone like you." "Someone like me? You mean an Omega with power they can't explain or control?" "I mean someone who's changing the rules of engagement." He leaned forward. "The Southern houses are built on hierarchies that require Omegas to be weak, compliant, dependent. You're living proof that those hierarchies are artificial, breakable, and that terrifies them." "Good. Seren." His voice carried a note of something, warning, concern. "They will come for you. Not with soldiers initially, but with politics, propaganda. They'll try to discredit you, isolate you, turn the alliance against you. Let them try. I'm serious. The South has resources you can't match. Wealth, influence, connections. They'll find your weaknesses and exploit them." "Why do you care?" Seren asked. "What does it matter to you what happens to me now?" Lord Ashvale was quiet for a long moment. "Because despite everything, you're still my daughter. And because I made a terrible mistake selling you to Virik. Not because it was cruel, but because I underestimated you. I thought I was disposing of a liability. Instead, I created the South's worst nightmare." "That's not an apology." "No. It's an acknowledgement and a warning." He stood. "Watch your back, Seren. The South won't fight you openly. They'll use subtlety, manipulation, the same tactics that kept them in power for generations. Don't assume the alliance will protect you when those tactics start working." "Is that all?" "One more thing." He reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather pouch, and placed it on the table. "Your mother's journals. I thought you might want them." Seren stared at the pouch, emotion rising in her throat despite her best efforts to suppress it. "She wrote about you," her father continued, "about her hopes for what you'd become. She saw something in you that I missed, something strong and defiant and unwilling to be contained." He moved toward the door. "She'd be proud of you now, for whatever that's worth." He left. Seren sat alone at the table, staring at the pouch, her hands trembling. Mara moved closer. "You okay?" "I don't know." Seren picked up the pouch, felt the weight of the journals inside. "I spent months hating him, and now it's more complicated." "Yeah." "Want to read them?" "Not yet. Maybe later, when this is over." She stood, tucking the pouch into her coat. "Let's go home." But her father's warning stayed with her. Over the next month, she started seeing the patterns he'd described. Rumors circulating that she'd used dark magic to trick the northern clans. Whispered suggestions that her power came from demonic sources. Stories that painted her as dangerous, unstable, a threat to natural order. The South was waging a propaganda war, and it was working. Support within the alliance began to waver. Some clans started questioning whether having her as a symbol was worth the controversy. Attendance at council sessions dropped as clan leaders found excuses to send representatives instead of coming themselves. Halvard called an emergency meeting. "We have a problem," he said bluntly, standing before the depleted council. Only 20 clan leaders had shown up, less than half the usual number. "The southern houses are spreading lies, and people are believing them. If we don't address this now, the alliance will fracture." "How do we fight rumors?" Torsten asked. "With truth," Seren said, "and with a demonstration that proves the South's propaganda is exactly that. Propaganda designed to weaken us because they're afraid. What kind of demonstration? Brenna asked. Seren stood, moving to the map on the wall. The South thinks we're weak, divided, easy to manipulate. So we show them otherwise. We challenge them directly. That's suicide, Vorthen said. They outnumber us 3-1 if all the southern houses unite. They won't unite. That's their weakness. They're as fractured as we used to be, just better at hiding it. Seren pointed to a location on the map. House Draymore's main estate. It's isolated, only lightly defended because they don't expect a northern attack this far south. We hit it, fast, precise, not to conquer, but to send a message. You want to raid Kael's home? Halvard said slowly. I want to prove the South isn't untouchable, that their propaganda can't protect them from consequences. She looked around the room. Kael humiliated me publicly, made an example of me to show what happens to Omegas who don't know their place. I'm going to return the favor. This is personal for you, Vorthen said. Yes, but it's also strategic. The South uses humiliation as a weapon. Time we used it back. Halvard considered this. It's risky. If we fail, we won't fail, not if we're smart about it. Seren looked at Ronan. You've been planning something like this, haven't you? I've seen the scouting reports on your desk. Ronan smiled slightly. I may have considered the tactical possibilities. Then let's make it real. The vote was closer than Seren would have liked. 12 in favor, 7 opposed, 1 abstaining, but it passed. They had 2 weeks to prepare. Seren trained harder than ever, pushing her abilities to their limits. She could control the power now, shape it, use it with precision instead of just releasing it in destructive bursts. But there was still so much she didn't understand about it, where it came from, what its limits were, whether it would burn her out eventually. Questions for later. Right now, she had a point to prove. The raid was set for the new moon, darkest night, maximum stealth. 50 fighters, the best from across the Alliance. Ronan led them, with Seren, Mara, and Garrett as his core commanders. They moved south in small groups, avoiding detection, meeting at a staging point 5 miles from the Draymore estate. Remember, Ronan addressed the assembled fighters, his voice low and steady. This isn't about conquest or slaughter. We go in, we make our point, we leave. Minimize casualties, maximum impact. What's the point exactly? One of the younger fighters asked. Ronan looked at Seren. You want to answer that? She stepped forward. The point is that the South doesn't get to define us anymore. They don't get to call us weak, savage, lesser. They don't get to spread lies without consequences. Tonight, we show them that the North isn't afraid, that we're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving. And anyone who tries to tear us down will regret it. The fighters cheered, quietly, but with genuine enthusiasm. They moved on the estate an hour before dawn. The defenses were exactly as the scouting reports had described. Minimal guards, focused on the main gate, assuming no one would be crazy enough to attack this far into southern territory. They were wrong. Seren's team went over the eastern wall while Ronan's team created a distraction at the front gate. Mara led a third team to secure the exit route. Inside the estate, Seren moved through hallways she'd only heard about, toward the main residence where Kael would be sleeping. She found his chamber easily, the largest one, decorated with expensive tapestries and fine furniture. He was asleep in a massive bed, alone. Lyra must have been smart enough to leave him after his failure. Seren stood over him for a moment, remembering the rejection, the humiliation, the laughter of the crowd. Then she grabbed a pitcher of ice water from the bedside table and dumped it on his head. Kael woke with a shout, flailing, disoriented. "Hello, Kael," Seren said calmly, his eyes focused on her. Went wide with shock and terror. How did I get past your defenses? Easily. Your guards are tied up outside. Your house is being searched as we speak, and you're going to sit there quietly while I explain something to you." He reached for a weapon on the nightstand. Seren raised her hand, power crackling around her fingers. "Don't." He froze. "Good choice." She moved closer. "You rejected me because you thought I was weak, defective, unworthy of your bloodline. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people to prove your point. And you know what? You were right. I was weak. Back then." "Seren, I'm sorry. I didn't—" "Shut up. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here to make sure you understand something fundamental. The world has changed. The old hierarchies you relied on, the assumptions about strength and weakness, and who deserves power, all of that is crumbling. The North is proving it. I'm proving it. What do you want from me? Nothing. I already have everything I need. She stepped back. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember that the weak Omega you rejected walked into your home, got past all your defenses, and stood over you while you were helpless. Remember that your power, your position, your alpha status, none of it protected you. And then I want you to think about what happens when the rest of the South realizes the same thing. She turned to leave. You've made a mistake, Kyle said, his voice shaking with anger and fear. The other houses, they'll unite against you now. They'll let them try. Seren looked back. I'm not afraid anymore. Of you, of them, of anyone. That's what you never understood, Kyle. Fear was the only thing holding me back, and you took it away when you rejected me. You freed me to become this, so in a way I should thank you. She left him there, soaked and terrified in his expensive bed. Outside, the northern fighters were already withdrawing, moving fast and efficient, taking nothing except the psychological victory. By the time the Draymore guards organized a response, the raiders were gone, vanished into the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts. The message was delivered. Word of the raid spread through the South like a plague. The Northern Alliance had struck deep into Southern territory, penetrated a major house's defenses, and walked away untouched. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. The South wasn't safe anymore. The North wasn't playing by the old rules. And the Omega who'd been rejected and humiliated had personally confronted the Alpha who'd cast her aside. The propaganda war shifted overnight. Suddenly, the South's stories about Seren being dangerous and unstable sounded less like warnings and more like admissions of fear. The narrative changed from the North is harboring a threat to the North has someone the South can't control. Within the alliance, support solidified. Clan leaders who'd been wavering returned to Frozen Lake. The council chamber filled again. At the next session, Halvard stood to address the full assembly. 3 months ago, we were dying, he said. Fractured, bleeding resources, waiting for the South to finish us off. Today, we're stronger than we've been in generations, united, growing, and it's because one person refused to accept the role the world assigned her. All eyes turned to Seren. I'm not proposing we make her a symbol anymore, Halvard continued. She already is one. What I'm proposing is that we make it official, that we create a new position, Northern Chancellor, someone who represents the Alliance in all external matters, who speaks with the full authority of the coalition, who leads not through inherited bloodline or traditional dominance, but through proven strength and strategic vision. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. I nominate Seren Ashvale for the position, Halvard said. Seconded, Brenna called immediately. Thirded, Torsten added. Vorthen stood. This is unprecedented. An Omega can't what? Halvard interrupted. Can't lead. She's been leading, can't fight. She's proven otherwise. Can't command respect. Look around this room and tell me people don't respect her. The Southern houses will never accept. I don't care what the Southern houses accept, Seren said, standing. This isn't about them. It's about us, about what we're building here. And if you're still worried about what the South thinks, maybe you should ask yourself whether you actually believe in this alliance, or whether you're just hedging your bets until something better comes along. Vorthen's face reddened, but he sat down. All in favor of creating the position of Northern Chancellor? Halvard called. 42 hands went up. Opposed? 3 hands. Abstaining? 5. Motion passes. Halvard turned to Seren. All in favor of appointing Seren Ashvale as the first Northern Chancellor? 40 hands this time. 4 opposed. 6 abstaining. Congratulations, Chancellor, Halvard said. Try not to start too many wars in your first week. Laughter, genuine warm, filled the chamber. Seren felt something shift inside her. Not just external circumstances, but something fundamental about who she was and what she'd become. The girl who'd knelt in chains was gone forever. In her place stood the Northern Chancellor, a leader, a force, someone who'd taken every terrible thing the world had thrown at her and forged it into power. That evening, she stood on the walls of Frozen Lake, looking out over the growing settlement. Lights in windows, smoke from fires,
People from a dozen different clans living and working together, proof that change was possible. Ronan found her there as the sun set. "Chancellor," he said, "has a nice ring to it." "It's terrifying." "Good. If you weren't terrified, I'd worry you didn't understand the responsibility." He stood beside her, both of them watching the settlement below. "You've come a long way from the fortress." "We both have. You're not the broken alpha everyone thought you were." "No. Turns out I just needed someone to fight for instead of just surviving for." He looked at her. "You gave me that. Gave all of us that." "I didn't do it alone." "No. But you started it. You refused to break when breaking would have been easier. That matters." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. "What happens now?" Seren asked finally. "Now we build. Strengthen the alliance. Defend our borders. Prove this isn't just a temporary coalition but something permanent. Something that lasts beyond us." "That's a lot of work." "You're the one who wanted to be more than a symbol." She smiled. "I did, didn't I?" "Any regrets?" Seren thought about it. About the rejection, the exile, the fear and pain and desperate fighting to survive. About becoming something she'd never imagined she could be. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the parts that hurt? Especially not those. The pain is what forged me into this. Take that away, and I'm back to being someone else's pawn." Ronan nodded slowly. "Then I guess we keep moving forward. Together?" "Together." A month later, Seren received a package. Inside was a letter from her father and a copy of House Ashvale's debt records. All of them marked paid in full. The letter was short. "Seren, I used the second half of Virek's payment to clear the house debts, as agreed. What I didn't mention is that I negotiated an additional clause. If you thrived in the north, if you became something significant, the money would revert to you rather than staying with the house. Consider this your inheritance. Not because I deserve to give you anything, but because your mother would have wanted you to have it. Use it however you see fit." Your father Seren stared at the records, emotions complicated and tangled. He'd planned for her success, had bet on her surviving when he claimed to think she'd break. Maybe he'd known her better than either of them realized. She used the money to establish a training center at Frozen Lake, a place where Omegas from across the north, and eventually from the south too, could come to learn combat, strategy, politics, to discover their own strength instead of accepting the roles assigned to them. Within a year, 50 students had enrolled. Within 2 years, it was 200. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, against massive resistance. But it was changing. And Seren stood at the center of that change, no longer fighting just for survival, but for something bigger. A future where strength wasn't determined by designation or birth, but by will and courage and refusal to accept limitations. She'd been rejected, humiliated, sold like property, exiled to the harshest place she'd ever known. And from those ashes, she'd built an empire, not through conquest or domination, but through proving that the old rules were breakable. That power came in forms the world hadn't recognized. That being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of the North, they would mark the beginning as the night an Omega threw a raider through a wall without touching him. But Seren knew the truth. It had started earlier. In a grand hall, in chains, being rejected and humiliated. That was the moment she'd stopped being what others wanted and started becoming what she needed to be. Everything after was just proving it to the rest of the world. She stood on the walls of Frozen Lake on a cold winter night, watching the settlement that had grown into a city, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. Beside her, Ronan, no longer just an alpha clinging to survival, but her partner in building something that would outlast them both. Below, the training center where a new generation learned that strength came in many forms. Around them, an alliance that had gone from desperate survival to genuine power. And inside her, finally, peace. Not the peace of safety or comfort, but the peace of knowing exactly who she was and refusing to apologize for it. She'd been called weak, defective, unwanted. Now they called her Chancellor, Leader, Queen of the North. The labels had changed, but the person underneath, stubborn, fierce, unbreakable, had always been there. She just needed the world to push her hard enough to find it. And when she did, everything changed.